I was 18 years old when my story began. My world was small back then, just dusty roads, open fields, and a dream I held tighter than anything else. I wanted to be a teacher. That was my one burning wish. In our little town, where money was always short and hope was always thin, books were my escape. They were my window to a bigger life. My father worked the farm every single day. His hands were rough and cracked from years of hard labor. His eyes held a tiredness that never really went away. My mother ran our small home with quiet strength and gentle grace. She never complained. She just kept going. And my two younger brothers, Desi and Callio, they filled our house with noise and laughter, that innocent, carefree kind of laughter that only kids can make. We didn't have much money, but we had each other. We had warmth. We had love. My parents always pushed me forward. They believed in me. They told me my mind was my greatest gift, and I believed them. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. I came home from school like any other day, but the moment I walked through the door, I felt it. Something was wrong. My parents were sitting together, waiting for me. Their faces were heavy. Their eyes were red. My mother grabbed my hand the second I got close. Her grip was tight, and her fingers were trembling. My father couldn't even look at me. He stared down at the floor. The air in that room felt thick, like something invisible was pressing down on all of us. Then my mother spoke. A man had asked for my hand in marriage. I stood completely still. I couldn't breathe. Marriage? At 18? It felt like someone was asking me to move to a different planet. I wasn't ready for that world. I didn't want it. I begged them. I reminded them of my studies. I reminded them of my dreams. I told them about the children in our town who needed good teachers. I told them I could be one of those teachers. My voice cracked. My hands shook. But my father finally spoke. His voice was heavy and broken. The harvest had failed again. The debts were growing fast. We were close to losing the farm, close to losing the roof over our heads. This man, a wealthy businessman named Rodell from a big city far away, had offered to help. He would pay off the debts. He would take care of my brothers. He would make sure my parents kept their home. I looked at Desi and Kyle. Their little faces were innocent and unaware. They didn't understand what was happening, but I did. My dream or their survival. That was the choice. I cried. God, I cried. The tears blurred everything in front of me. But through those tears, I made my decision. I agreed to marry a man I had never met. A 30-year-old businessman. A stranger. A person whose only connection to us was a distant family acquaintance from years ago. The wedding came fast, way too fast. My mother sewed a white dress for me with her own hands. She worked on it for days. It was simple and beautiful, a true labor of love. But when I put it on, it didn't feel like a wedding dress. It felt like a costume, like I was playing a role in someone else's story. My friends gathered at the small church. Their eyes were bright and excited. They whispered and smiled. They thought I was lucky. A girl from our poor town marrying into wealth. They were happy for me. I smiled back at them, but it was a fake smile. a painted-on mask. Inside, I felt hollow. I stood at the altar. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Then the church doors opened slowly. A tall man walked in. That was Rodell. He was dressed in a sharp, dark suit. He looked powerful, serious. His face was strong and stern. His eyes were dark and unreadable, like two locked doors. He walked to the altar without looking at me, not even once. The ceremony felt cold. Every word, every ritual felt distant and foreign. When he placed the ring on my finger, the metal felt like ice. I whispered my vows. My voice was barely a sound. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and steady. In that moment, the girl I had always been just disappeared. The dreamer, the girl with fire in her chest, gone. She was replaced by a stranger named Mrs. Rodell. The reception was quiet and awkward. I sat beside my new husband and felt invisible. He focused on his food. He greeted the guests with a nod here and there, but he never once turned to look at me. The silence between us felt like a wide, frozen ocean. When it was time to leave, saying goodbye to my family nearly destroyed me. I hugged my mother. She held me so tight. I felt her tears on my neck, warm and steady. My father wrapped his arms around me with a desperate, apologetic strength, and Desi and Kaio grabbed onto my dress with their small hands, looking up at me with wide, confused eyes. That broke what was left of my heart. I was led to a sleek black car. It was the most luxurious thing I had ever been inside. The leather seats were soft, the windows were tinted. It smelled like a world I didn't belong to. We drove away. I pressed my face against the glass and watched my home get smaller and smaller. The lights of my town faded. Then they disappeared completely. Only darkness remained. For hours, we drove in total silence. Rodell sat beside me like a statue. His face was forward. His expression was unreadable. He said nothing. He didn't ask my name. He didn't ask if I was okay. He gave me nothing. The city hit me like a wall. Neon lights everywhere. Tall steel buildings reaching into the sky. Cars honking and rushing in every direction. It was loud and sharp and overwhelming. It felt hostile, like it was warning me to turn back. We pulled up to a massive house. It was less of a home and more of a fortress. Stone walls, iron gates, cold and grand and silent. A stern housekeeper named Verna greeted us at the door. She was polite, but in a clinical, professional way, like she was reading from a script. Rodell walked inside without waiting for me. He didn't hold the door. He didn't look back. I followed him in silence, like a shadow trailing behind someone who didn't know I existed. The inside of the house was stunning. Marble floors that reflected everything. Grand staircases rising up to the second floor. Expensive paintings on every wall. Crystal chandeliers hanging overhead. It was magnificent, but it was cold. There was no warmth in it. No signs of life. It felt like a museum, not a home. Verna showed me to my room. It was bigger than my entire family's house. Everything in it was perfect and expensive. But as she left and I stood there alone, one thing became painfully clear. This was my room, not ours. Rodell had his own space. I had mine. I sat on the edge of the bed. Then I lay down, and I cried. I cried for the life I had left behind. I cried for my mother and her tired hands. I cried for Desi and Kayo and their small, confused faces. I cried for my dream of teaching. I cried until I had nothing left. Then, late that night, there was a knock at my door. I sat up quickly, wiping my eyes. The door opened. Rodell stood in the doorway. The hall light behind him made his silhouette look even bigger. I braced myself. I expected coldness. I expected a demand. But he just looked at me. Then in a quiet voice, he told me I looked exhausted. He said I should rest. That was it. He didn't come inside. He didn't touch me. He just closed the door and left, gently, without a word more. I stared at the ceiling for a long time after that. Then I cried again, but this time, just a little less. The weeks that followed were the loneliest of my life. I would wake up every morning to a silent house. Rodell was always already gone before I came downstairs. He left at dawn every day for his office. I would eat breakfast alone in a dining room so vast and empty that the sound of my own fork felt too loud. Verna kept the house clean and made sure I had everything I needed, but she was distant, efficient, professional, not warm. I had no one to talk to, no one to laugh with. I was surrounded by expensive things and starving for simple human kindness. I started to wonder if Rodell was ashamed of me, a simple country girl, stuck inside his grand, sophisticated world, out of place, unwanted, just an obligation he had agreed to. Then I found the library. One evening I wandered through a door I hadn't opened before, and there it was, a room lined from floor to ceiling with books, thousands of them. My heart lifted for the first time in weeks. I stepped inside slowly, running my fingers along the spines. I felt something close to peace. I was deep in the shelves when I heard footsteps. Rodell had come home early. I turned, startled. He stopped when he saw me. We stared at each other for a second. He looked at the book in my hand. Something shifted in his face. Not a smile, just a slight softening, a flicker of something alive behind those dark eyes. He asked me if I liked reading. I nodded. Without another word, he reached up and pulled a thin volume of poetry from the shelf. He handed it to me. Then he walked away. It was such a small thing, but it was the first real thing that had passed between us, the first bridge over that frozen ocean. I decided, starting that night, to try. I began leaving the hallway lights on at night so he wouldn't come home to darkness. I started cooking meals with Verna's guidance. I learned what he liked, what he avoided, what time he usually got back. He never said thank you, not with words, but every night his plate came back completely empty. And somehow that felt like enough. I also found the garden. Behind the house was a large, overgrown yard. The rose bushes were wild and dying. The flower beds were choked with weeds. It broke my heart to see it. Back home, We treated the earth with care. A dying garden felt like a betrayal. I started working out there every day, digging, pulling weeds, pruning dead branches, watering the soil. My hands got dirty again, and it felt right. It felt like me. It gave me purpose in a house that had given me none. One evening at sunset, I was kneeling in the soil when I heard footsteps on the stone path behind me. I looked up. Rodell was standing there, watching me. He had been watching for a while, I think. I waited for him to say something sharp or dismissive. Instead, he spoke softly. He told me the garden had belonged to his mother. He said it had died after she passed away. He stood there quietly for a moment, looking at the roses, and for the first time I saw something real in his face, something that wasn't power or sternness. It was grief. It was loneliness. It was the face of a man who had also lost something precious and didn't know how to say it. We didn't say much more that evening. We just stood there together as the sun went down. But the silence that night wasn't cold. It was peaceful. Something had changed. Slowly, like ice melting in early spring, things began to shift between us. We started eating dinner together, not in silence anymore. We talked. At first, just simple things, safe things. He asked about the farm. I asked about his business. I told him about growing up with Desi and Kayo, about the way my mother made everything feel okay even when it wasn't. He told me about the pressure of running the company his father had built. He had grown up in a world of high expectations and hard roles. No room for softness, no room for error. His sternness wasn't cruelty, I began to understand. It was armor, a shield he had built over years to survive a world that never let him just be a person. Then, one night, a summer storm hit. It came fast and violent. Thunder shook the walls of the house. Lightning cracked across the sky in blinding flashes. The power went out. The whole house fell into darkness. I was under my covers, trembling. I had been afraid of storms my whole life, that deep, irrational fear that no amount of logic can fix. Then came a soft knock. The door opened. Rodell stepped in, holding a lit candle. The warm glow moved across his face. He looked at me, without judgment, without annoyance. He just came in, sat down on the edge of my bed, and started talking, low and calm. He told me about the time he was a little boy, scared of thunderstorms himself, hiding in a closet while his father told him to toughen up. He laughed at himself quietly while telling it. The storm outside kept raging, but his voice was steady. He stayed until the thunder faded. He stayed until my breathing slowed and my eyes grew heavy. When I woke the next morning, he was gone, but something remained, something warm, something new. He had become my protector. The months moved on, and the house around us began to come alive. Real laughter filled those tall, quiet rooms. Rodell's serious face would break open when something made him smile. And when he smiled, really smiled, he was a completely different person. He was warm. He was handsome in a way I hadn't noticed before. He was real. Then one afternoon, he came home carrying a stack of books. He set them on the dining table in front of me. They were books on teaching, on education theory and classroom methods. Books I would have hunted down in any library back home. He remembered my dream. He sat across from me and looked me straight in the eyes. He told me I was brilliant. He told me being his wife didn't mean I had to give up who I was. He told me I should study, prepare myself, go after the career I thought I had lost forever. I couldn't speak for a moment. Something cracked open inside my chest. The last piece of my resentment just fell away, quietly, like leaves dropping from a tree in autumn. My parents hadn't sold me into misery. They had, without knowing it, led me to a man of real and rare character. I started watching him differently after that. The way he moved through a room, the way he focused when he was thinking, the way he listened, truly listened when I spoke. A quiet warmth grew inside me, slow and steady and sure. I loved him. One evening, we were sitting by the fireplace. The fire crackled softly. The room was warm and golden. Everything felt right in the way that some rare moments just do. I moved closer to him, slowly, gently. I rested my head on his shoulder. He went still for just a second. Then he relaxed. His arm came around me and pulled me close. When he whispered my name, it sounded like the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. Our first kiss wasn't rushed or desperate. It was soft. It was certain. It was the seal on something that had been building for months. It was the closing of a long, difficult chapter and the opening of something new and full of light. My life didn't end when I left my village. It just turned a corner. I started teaching at a school in the city not long after. Every morning I walked into that classroom and felt exactly where I was supposed to be. There was a girl in my class named Wren, quiet, withdrawn, always sitting in the back. She reminded me of myself at that age, unsure, invisible, waiting for someone to notice her. I noticed her. I stayed after class. I listened. I showed up for her, the way Radel had showed up for me during that storm. Slowly, Wren began to open up. She raised her hand more. She smiled. She blossomed. Watching her grow felt like one of the greatest victories of my life. Eventually, Radel and I traveled back to my village to visit my family. That drive felt nothing like the first one. The first time, I had watched my home disappear behind me in tears. This time, I watched it grow bigger through the windshield, and I was smiling. My heart was full. My brothers came running out before the car even stopped. They jumped on Radel without any shyness at all, and he laughed, that big, genuine laugh I had grown to love, and chased them through the yard. Later, he worked beside my father in the field. They talked and sweated and joked together under the open sky. Two men from completely different worlds, side by side. My mother pulled me aside that evening. She held my face in both of her hands. She looked into my eyes for a long, quiet moment. Then she smiled and told me I had that glow, the kind that only love can put on a person's face. She said that love is like a garden. It needs time. It needs care. It needs faith. It doesn't grow overnight. She was right. It never does. I used to think my story was a tragedy, A young girl's dreams crushed by poverty and a forced marriage, a life stolen before it had even really started. That's what I believed when I stood at that altar, with ice on my finger and a hollow chest. But I was wrong. My story was never a tragedy. It was a test, a slow and painful and beautiful test. It was proof that the paths we fear most sometimes lead us exactly where we need to go, that the people we are handed to by circumstance can, if we stay open, become the people we choose with our whole hearts. I married a stranger, and I found my soulmate. I lost a dream, and I had it handed back to me by the very person I least expected. Love and joy have a way of finding us, even in the quietest houses, even in the most unlikely hearts. So if you are standing in a dark beginning right now, if you are scared, if things feel out of your control, if the life you wanted feels like it just slipped away, hold on. Keep your heart open. Keep moving forward. Stay curious. Stay brave. Your beautiful story might be just one conversation away, one garden away, one storm away. Don't stop walking toward it. Thanks for listening to my story. If you liked it, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, and tell me where you're listening from.